Hello everyone. So as you're probably aware, I've been assembling quite a lot of foreground buildings for a Wild West game recently, and really impressed by foreground. But all the time I've been putting them together, I've been tempted to kind of mess around with them with them a little bit to um, change some colours or make various amendments, but I'm reluctant to, because they're so expensive that if I mess it up, then it's going to really um, kind of ruin the enjoyment of them for me. So what I thought I would do is get my hands on a much cheaper MDF building and play around with it to my heart's content, basically, see what I could do with it. And if it ended up being spoilt, then it wouldn't be such a financial disaster. And this is what I've come up with. So I thought I'd show you this, but it's going to be of interest to anyone who uses MDF in their war games, I think. The techniques that I've used and so on would apply to any period, not just Wild West. So this could be of use to a lot of people. So this model is from War Bases. They do a range of Wild West buildings called Cactus Creek, and they're basically cheap and cheerful. This one is called Annabelle's Bar. Now, I probably won't get the entire thing in, so there we go. War Bases Cactus Creek, and this is the image of it that they have on their website. Now, I wasn't expecting it to come painted or with any posters or signs on or anything like that, but I think you have to be aware when you buy this that all you get is the plain MDF colouring. You have to make any enhancements to it yourself. So I think they do say that on their website, but what you see in this photograph isn't what you get. It's basically three boxes, one on top of the other, with the exterior surfaces laser cut to represent planking or so on. No colour in it whatsoever, other than the basic kind of woody brown MDF colour, which is ideal for Wild West situation anyway. But it's far too flat, and one of my other dislikes about MDF is that you always see the kind of joints and so on jutting through. It's obvious that it's MDF and so on. And in general, I'm not usually a big fan of MDF, but having completed this building and changed it around a lot, I might change my mind a little bit about that. So I'm quite pleased with this. So I'll just give you a little spin of it first of all before I start talking about what I've done with it, just so that you can see. See it from the outside. So this is complete. This wall here is completely untouched. So this is what you would get if you didn't make any alterations to it, basically. And as I say, it's just very simple, three rectangular shapes, one on top of the other. No internal detail whatsoever. No, the roof and the story are detachable, so you can place figures inside it. But you're just basically putting them into a box. you know, which is what happens in a lot of war games anyway. If you want to, you know, represent a building as being occupied, but for a skirmish game, it doesn't really. It's not, you know, doesn't really work. You want some interior detail as well. Right, so all the kind of things that I altered about it. Well, obviously there's colour in it. Now, in the past, I've always had big problems colouring MDF buildings because I've always used acrylic paints on them. I don't know why it didn't occur to me, and I've never heard this mentioned, but why not use inks? And I discovered that they take ink, MDF takes ink wonderfully. It soaks it up, so you really use a lot of ink on it. It kind of absorbs it immediately and dries almost instantly. But the beauty of the ink is that you're left with all the etchings of the laser, so you can still see the darker kind of colouring where the laser has actually burnt the wood. So it retains that kind of contrast, whereas if you were to slap acrylic over it, you know, it would go into those very shallow cuts anyway and hide a lot of the detail. So that was my first pleasant surprise. Use ink, and you can get lots of different colours. I mean, I've used red, I've used a different colour on the inside wall, as you'll see later, and I've used, this it actually looks green, but it was a turquoise ink. But this is another thing, that the MDF kind of does change the colour of the ink slightly and take away a lot of its brightness, its vividness, and tone it down. You know, so it looks more of a sort of green, which is a more appropriate colour for the era. I'm just going to try and zoom in a little bit so you can see what I mean about the planking. There, you see, it's kept it all. It's kept all that detail. So, you know, I was really pleased with that effect. So that's the first thing. Use ink, and I've also used ink on the windows around on each side, as you saw earlier. Paint everything as much as possible on the sprue as well, and then you don't have to worry about you know, taking a lot of care. You can just use a large brush and wipe it over the parts on the sprue, and it's very fast, very easy effect to achieve. Okay, right, now next up, the posters are all leftovers from my foreground buildings, but they work equally well on this. So you know, cut them out, post them up on your building. So if you haven't got any foreground buildings, you haven't got any posters, things like that are really easy to come across on the internet. So just grab images of you know, wanted posters and notices for horse sales. There's loads of them about on the internet. Grab them, miniaturize them, and print them out. I don't have a graphics package on my laptop nowadays, but I do have Microsoft Office, so I've got PowerPoint, and I found PowerPoint works perfectly well as a kind of piece of graphics software. So I tend to put images into PowerPoint and reduce them down that way, and then print them out. But I use PowerPoint a lot, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about how to use PowerPoint or the tricks that I use to get the effects that I've achieved using PowerPoint, because that is a sort of a video in itself. Basically, this is just to show you what is possible. So that takes me on to the the sign. Let's try and zoom in a little bit on that. So the sign I actually printed onto cardboard, and the reason for that is if you print onto paper, the PVA glue, the moisture in it can seep through thin paper and make the colours run and so on, whereas cardboard, there's enough thickness there to soak up any moisture in the glue and prevent that coming out on the other surface. So what I've done here is, unlike this sign on there, which I think is totally anachronistic, you would never be able to have printed the detail on the cards, for instance, in that way back in Western times, and the font that they've used, that kind of cursive script, doesn't feel right to me either. So what I've done with my sign is Google fonts that were used in Western times, and you'll find there's lots of recommendations about what kind of fonts you could use to make things look authentic. On my Microsoft Office at the moment, I only had one font that I discovered was around in those times, and it was a font called Bookman Old Style. But I have in the past. I didn't do it on this occasion, and I'm not going to go into the technicalities of how you do it, but it is possible to find fonts and to import them into your software for free. You don't have to pay for them, and then from then on, once you've done that, they're there permanently on your laptop, and you could use those. So if you want, if in future, if I want to get a different style of font, then I'll I might experiment a little bit more. So the Lucky Strike Saloon wording and the poker and the whiskey are all Bookman Old Style. When you insert the text into a shape on PowerPoint, you can then adjust the shape. So that is how I've got the curve on the Lucky Strike wording, and the poker and the whiskey words, I've equalised the height of the letters as well. So I've made a sort of slight adjustment there, which is why it looks slightly different. I found a few other shapes. So the stars, which I thought were common kind of shape in Western times, I put in the corners, and most significantly, in the background you can see it's printed on, it's on a sort of fake wood kind of surface. Now that is a really useful technique for a lot of different material types in buildings, that when you fill a shape with a colour in PowerPoint and a lot of other graphic software techniques, you can fill it with a colour, but you can also fill it with a texture, and they offer you a whole range of textures that you can use. So this one, trying to remember it, I don't think it's walnut, but you can get walnut, mahogany, cork, parchment, hemp, various colours of marble. So if you're trying to do something, make a surface, an MDF surface, look like it's built from marble, you can do that. And you print it all out, and then print the lettering over the top, and it looks like it's been painted onto a wooden surface. I mean, you get too close to it, obviously, you realise that it's cardboard. But from a foot or so away, I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, so I think that is everything around the outside that I wanted to mention. So now what I'm going to do is change the camera roll angle and look at it more from above, and then go through each layer at a time and give you an idea of some clues on what I did on the inside. Right, here we go then. So we're looking down from above now, and you can see this is the front of the building with the sign. So on the exterior balcony, you can see it looks like a plank flooring. That was just flat MDF, no detail on it whatsoever, none of the etching that they'd actually put, you can't see it now, but they'd actually put on the lower boardwalk down there. So that again is a similar technique. I printed onto cardboard. I found some images on the internet of plank flooring patterns. So it's the kind of thing that you get sort of vinyl flooring and so on that's fake wood and that kind of thing. So you can find those kind of things very easily. So I grabbed an image of that, filled it into a shape on PowerPoint, and then you have to go one step further than that, because if you were to print it out just like that, the planks would be out of scale. They would be about a centimetre wide, something like that. So I then reduce the image of the shape, reduce the size of the shape down, and that in turn reduces down the size of the planking, and then save that shape as a picture, and then print out another shape filling it with the original picture, and also setting the fill as tiles rather than just a single picture, and you get this. I haven't explained that very well, and it's not my intention to teach you at this point or at any point how to go about getting the most that you can out of PowerPoint, but it's just to show you what it is possible to do with a little bit of messing about. I mean, I often just spend an hour or so playing around with PowerPoint with any ultimate kind of aim in mind, just to see what you can achieve, what effects you can achieve with PowerPoint, and there is an awful lot you can do. So that is the plank flooring. Similarly with the roof itself, now wall bases suggest using fine sandpaper and cutting out a shape to surface the roof. If you didn't do anything, you would just literally have a very dull brown surface that is quite obviously untextured and untreated MDF. So you have to do something with it, really. If you just painted it, you'd have a flat colour. Sandpaper, yeah, that would work, but again, it doesn't have any texture in it. So what I've done here is I've printed out on card again. I think it was originally a sand texture, and then you can use artistic effects on the image, and I forget which one I used, but it basically gave it more of a mottled look. And again, you get up close to it, it's obviously a piece of cardboard that's had a colour printed on it, but from a foot or more away, I think it looks like a kind of a surface that's been treated with pitch or something like that. It works for me. Another thing you do have to do though with cardboard when the edges are going to show, is it would look, you would have an obvious white line all the way around that you could see from the sides. So just run a kind of black wash around the edge before you glue it down to the top, and that turns into a sort of greyish colour, and it hides that white cardboard. Now the hatch on the top is an additional part that I purchased. I found a company called Blots, so I bought 3 of their trapdoors, and all that does is really gives you the pretense that there's an access onto the roof, so that if you are going to position figures on the roof, it makes it more believable. That's how they got up there. They gained access through the trapdoor rather than they flew up there or scaled the walls or something like that. So that's just an additional feature. As you can see, 3 trapdoors cost me £2, so I've got 2 left over that I can use for future projects. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say on the roof. Oh yeah, other than to say, you probably noticed when I was spinning the building around that I did use red paint on that surface there, so that it matches in with the rest of the front facade. Okay, now let's go through to the next layer, and you can see I've made some even more massive alterations to it. So this is the upper floor. Now, as I say, originally this was just a featureless box, so if you put figures in there, there was absolutely no way that they could have gained access to that floor, and that's fine if you're doing a sort of war game where you're using units and multiple bases and that kind of thing, and you just want to represent them being inside the building. But Dead Man's Hand is more of a skirmish game, and a gunfight could take place on this floor, and I wanted it to look more realistic, so I carved out a rectangular hole in the floor while it was still a separate piece, and the size of the hole, this staircase I purchased again from Blots, painted it up using red ink again. I was thinking of using the steps from Foreground, but they don't actually have a handrail, and I wanted something with a handrail, because you'll see on the lower floor it doesn't look right just to have steps that don't have any sort of handrail to stop people just falling from them as they climb the steps. So all you have to do is carve out a hole that is about the footprint size of the steps themselves. So in other words, the steps come on a base, so I've cut out a hole that is a little bit bigger than the base size, but you could cut out a hole that is the entire footprint and it wouldn't look unrealistic. That then leaves you with a very kind of precipitous drop down from this side of the floor. So here I've made a little kind of barrier or piece of walling or whatever you like to call it, and I've used spare bits from my previous Foreground sets. So they often give you the option of shuttering the windows, and I haven't chosen to do that, so I've been left over with a lot of pieces of that should be window shutters, but I just glued them back to back so that there's detail on both sides, and then it turned out they were just the right size by pure chance to fill that kind of angle there, and it works quite well, I think, as a sort of little sort of little bit of separation, safety measure. The flooring again is that same technique that I use for the front balcony. It's just planking that I printed out as tiles onto a piece of cardboard. The other thing about printing onto paper, as well as the fact that the colours can run from the moisture in the glue, is that when you do try and paste paper down onto a large surface like this, it can rock and run and so on, and you get ripples in it as it dries, whereas cardboard doesn't do that. So underneath that cardboard there is an unsuccessful experiment with paper, which I've now hidden with the cardboard. The steps themselves, the top is slightly higher than the level of the flooring. So again, this is another piece of this is cut out and throw away panelling from a foreground building. It was the outer kind of surface that was used, and this was just a bit that fell out in the middle. But I've just used that as a sort of step down, as it were. And the walls, they don't look as though I treated them in any way, but I did paint them with a kind of orange paint. But the colour is not that much different from the original colour of the walling. It does look slightly more coloured, and what I'm going to do with that is probably have furniture, glued up against it, and mirrors and so on. I'm thinking I've got my knuckle duster stuff has finally arrived. It arrived 2 days ago, and one of those is a billiard table, but there's a billiard cue rack, so I might glue something like that on the wall. So it's going to look it looks bare at the moment, but it's going to look a lot better once it's been furnished and so on. So I was thinking of a kind of a billiard table up here and that kind of thing, tables that people can drink at. Right, now next floor down. So this staircase I've left loose, and that's because it'll be easier to store if I can take this staircase out eventually. On the lower floor I've gone to town a little bit more. So that's how the staircase would appear, but let's take it out for the moment so you can see what else I've done. So again, the flooring is the same technique with the cardboard, but I've now given this floor wallpaper, which probably isn't appropriate for a sort of spit and sawdust saloon, but I wanted to see what effects I could achieve. So as I say, I was just playing around with it. So this has been tarted up a bit. They've gone all posh, and I've got a sort of damask wallpaper all the way round. Now this was fiddly, won't deny it, but I'm quite pleased with the effect. I haven't done anything with the internal surface of the door, you'll notice. I'm just going to leave that. But I was very pleased with the effect of the wallpaper, and that is a very similar technique to the planking that you can Google damask wall patterns, which were typical of the kind of Victorian era. Grab some images, fill a shape, reduce the shape, fill another shape of the correct size, and fill it with tiles rather than with the original picture, and you end up with the perfect scaling of the pattern that you wanted. And obviously it was fiddly in that I pre-printed it so that there were gaps for the windows that I could just cut out that weren't filled with the pattern. and so to do that I had to measure up all the internal dimensions before I actually glued the thing together, so I had a rough idea of, or fairly accurate idea of where the windows and doors were and what sizes they were, and then I could just cut the cardboard out with a scalpel, and it fitted pretty well. And again, you do get white showing up, so you have to run a black wash around all that white, taking care. I mean, it did run in the, some of the corners, so I'm pretending that that's kind of damp or something. Doesn't show up too badly. It didn't, as I say, I was experimenting, and I'll know to try and avoid that in future. But yeah, there you go. That's the entire building. I thought, I was quite pleased with that, and it's the nice thing about it is it's gonna not look out of place now on the tabletop against the much better quality foreground buildings that I have. So I'm quite happy to have this on the table. And as I say as well, you could use these techniques for any building, any period. If you're presented with a flat, featureless MDF surface, then you can really go to town and tart it up. I'm thinking things like Roman buildings. That marble would be perfect. The marble surfaces would be perfect for Roman buildings. It saves you all the bother of trying to paint them, and put the detail on yourself, and you can get, as I say, you can get some wonderful effects. And I was thinking about the hotels, hotel rooms and so on, especially the lobbies of the hotels, putting some wallpaper in there to make it look more comfortable. There's all kinds, but I don't think I'm ever going to try and alter the foreground buildings in any way. I'm happy with the level of detail that they have on their inner surfaces as well, but I'm certainly going to have a go at another cheap and cheerful building and see what I can do with that, having done this one. Right, there you go, that's it. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. See you again on the next video. Bye for now.